Hey guys, it's Graham. What's crackin'? I read a book today that I almost didn't finish just because of how it started. It wasn't necessarily that it started bad, but it just kept striking this really weird middle ground that I've come to describe as aggressively beige, like a very intense drink of water. It was trying so hard not to offend anybody, it seemed like, that it just kept standing in positions as it was describing, character interactions and the setting and all that stuff. Let me explain. I've read, this is now the third book in Eric Flint's 1632 / Ring of Fires / Acidi Shards world. The basic conceit of which is that there's something weird that happened on some distant alien planet. I don't know the full ramifications of it all. But basically, like, these cosmic shards got shot out into space and they keep hitting Earth. And they randomly cause time inversions. Like a shard will drop onto a town. You don't really see it or anything. It's kind of an invisible ray. But anything within the area of effect will get teleported back in time with a different spot on Earth, and they'll switch places in time and space. The first book had this happen with a mining town in West Virginia that suddenly switched places with a German town in 1632. And so all of a sudden you have these 20th century blue-collar union workers trying to make their way in the middle of a war in the Germanic portions of Europe. And I thought it was cool for the most part. It was a bit slow, and obviously, since you're trying to bring readers up to speed on a time and place that they're not generally familiar with, there was a lot of just basically history lessons mixed in as part of the text. But now that I've read a couple of books in this series, I get the general idea that that's just how these books work, because they're explaining things that you don't know. In a sense, it's like a history book disguised as a novel. And it's not bad, it works. The series has been going on for years. He's collaborated with plenty of other authors that come in, and he gets his name on the cover because they're playing in his sandbox, and then they get to tell their story within it. There was another book that was even mentioned in the one that I read today where some modern day prison got teleported back to the time of the era of Spanish conquistadors. But there was another shard that also dropped a Tyrannosaurus in there or something. You can basically do whatever you want. Take this from this time and this from this place and cross it over and let's have some fun. Which, cool. I'm all about that concept, and I'm interested in seeing just what kind of gonzo stuff authors can come up with. Now, Eric Flint died a couple of years ago at this point, I want to say. It was sometime after COVID. I never knew or met the guy. This is just, I've read a couple of these books in his series. But there are other authors who have worked with him and stuff who I guess are still writing Ring of Fire / Acidi Shards books. And there are two authors then that wrote this one called An Angel Called Peterbilt. Now, I'd never heard of either of these authors before, Paula Gadet and Gorg Huff, very memorable names. What I was able to discover is that Paula and Gorg generally write together. If you find a book on Amazon with his name on it, it's usually going to have her name on it as well. And they're also longtime friends and associates of Eric Flint, so it makes sense that they would have permission and I guess the confidence of his estate to write within this setting. This is the first book of the Acidi Shards that I've noticed where it's not just a one-off, here's this small area that gets hit by an Acidi Shard and that's that. They're able to make contact with present day America, I guess, what they would consider to be weird four-way stops in Oklahoma, I swear, with what they consider to be, the future. They're able to make contact with the present, our present, and appraise them of their situation and begin an exchange, communicate, get some goods from the future sent back to the past, and all that. Like, it changes the type of story that it is then. It's not just like, oh, we're stuck here, we better figure out how to survive and thrive. The families that get sent back in time, there's a husband and wife trucking duo. They've got a kind of preteen daughter. She's like 12 when the book starts. And they're long-haul truckers. He's pulling a tanker full of mostly diesel and then in another compartment gasoline. And, he's at a truck stop and a country store. And they're stopping for goods, and then an Asidi shard hits, and suddenly they're teleported 1,000 years backward to Cahokia, Missouri. But it's not quite called Cahokia yet, and they kind of end up in the middle of a tribal conflict. There are two Native American tribes, but they're not really names that I recognized. And this is where we encounter some odd synchronicity, timey-wimey thingies lining up. Just last night in the Writer Dojo group, somebody was asking the group, like, hey, I'm thinking about writing a supernatural Western, but what should I do as far as, like, having an Indian tribe? Should I include a real one, or should I just make one up? And there were a lot of people that gave good feedback. My general take on it was that, well, it just depends on how much research you want to do, because Native American tribes are understandably, like, very protective of their image in popular fiction, popular media, just because they want to be shown accurately. And if you're going to go that route, you're going to want to do a lot of research to make sure that whatever tribe you're writing about, you do it with, like, the right attention to detail. But if that's going to take too much effort away from you actually doing the work of writing the other 98% of your story, you can generally make one up. You'll want to get some, like, certain particulars right. If they're Plains Indians in the mid-1800s, okay, they'll have horses. They'll be mostly nomadic and be very warlike. If they're in the Northeast, they'll be, planters. But by the 1800s, I guess it wouldn't be a Western if it's in the Northeast. You get the idea. So I think it would be a safer bet to just make up a name that sounds similar to other names from the area, and then just type that name into Google and make sure you're not accidentally using the name of a real tribe, but just go from there. I kind of got the feeling that these two authors did that with this book. Now, it being 1,000 years ago, that puts it 500 years before Columbus, and so that's plenty of time for whatever tribes may have existed around Cahokia to change, evolve, to be known to history by a different name. Despite me listening to this book through Speechify it was like a 5-hour listen, I couldn't tell you the names of the tribes. One of them was like the Kalka, and the other one, it sounded like their name was like Hoja or something, but I wasn't reading the names. I know that they were very unusual, and I wasn't able to, like, make it stick in my head, like, oh, must be how this spelled. This must be how I swear I can talk. This must be how this is spelled. But basically, this trucker family, the Anderleys, they get sent back in time, and there were also 3 people who were leaving the truck stop, a mother and her 2 kids, that also get sent back in time. And this is where there's a minor bit of hand-wavium convenience, but it just so happens that this mother she's got a PhD in chemistry, which comes in handy because they're going to be there for years, and she's got to find ways to keep the diesel and fuel supply viable, but she knows chemical tricks. And they meet the local band of Indians, and they start trading with them, and she's able to use her chemistry tricks to show them how to get better crops that are also able to produce essential nutrients that can cure a number of health problems that they have, from malnutrition and so on and so forth. They really start messing with time, but it's not one of those things where it messes with the actual timeline. It's you go back in time and you create a pocket universe with these Ascidi shards, so you're not screwing with anything that actually happened. You're just creating a separate treatment of it. But this is where the whole like aggressively beige, trying not to offend anybody thing comes in. They're very on the nose about using CE instead of BC for naming the year. They arrive in like 1002 or 1003, and they're there for numerous years. It's like the year 1008 by the time the story ends. But at the same time, like they're talking about establishing Christianity back in the past, because for the most part they're all different flavors of Christian, and they even have a DVD of Jesus Christ Superstar that once they start making contact with the Indians and showing them some of their technology and some of their media, they play the DVD, and they're able to understand it, and they want to know more about this cross god and what's that all about. And so they're the primary source of their exposure to Christianity from 1,000 years in the future is through a musical, and that ends up giving them something else to sink their teeth into, because they want to move away from their current pantheon of gods, because it's all based on human sacrifice, and some of them are kind of tired of seeing their daughters sent off to pay tribute to these Indian gods that give them a good harvest and so on and so forth. And so like they're eager to believe in something that doesn't require that kind of commitment. So then again, like they're still like, okay, yeah, believing Jesus Christ, and he came to earth to sacrifice himself for us, but again, we're going to keep using CE, and like they even have discussions about it. There was also like a bit of just really awkward, like people don't talk this way kind of racial element to it, because the Anderleys were very like blonde white people, and Alyssa, the chemist woman, was black, and like every once in a while it would come up, you're like, oh well, am I okay to go with you guys? And they're like, yeah, of course you could come with us, we're stuck in this strange world together, we got to figure this out. She's like, well, some people wouldn't because of the color of my skin. And they're like, don't worry, we're not racist. Like, wow, people just don't talk that way. It's friggin' weird. So the dialogue was clunky at times, but the through line of the story was actually pretty cool. And right around the halfway point, I realized like I'm enjoying this story, even though I've obviously got some quibbles with how it's executed. And I finally realized, like, this reminds me of what it was like to read The Martian, which was like basically a STEM lesson pretending to be a novel. But it was a great read, like obviously a very compelling read. I went and bought a copy of it in hardcover, and I really enjoyed that book, even though it was so heavy on the science and some of it went over my head. This one was kind of the same way. It was like the writers put a lot of effort into, explaining like, okay, what kind of farming techniques would they bring from the 21st century back to the 11th century, and what would an alliance with the local tribe look like, and who would their enemies be, and how would the Indians try to mimic their technology. Obviously they can't forge iron and create their own Peterbilt, but they see that here are these people that come from the future that don't look like us, and they have this giant loud demon thingy, and in their word, like demon and angel are kind of the same thing. It's just a supernatural entity. So that's hence the title, An Angel Called Peterbilt. It's also got a sick paint job of a dragon on it, so that helps with this whole supernatural element that the Indians end up kind of imposing on it. But it's just like, okay, if a trucker got sent 1,000 years back in time to Mesoamerica, I don't know, maybe 1,000 isn't technically Mesoamerica, I don't know. What would they do? What impact would they have? How would they survive and thrive? And where would they go from there? And it presents a very readable and intriguing story on the technical level. It's just the characters were not all that believable, and some of their interactions seemed like awkwardly forced. But I did finish it. I was tempted after a little while. I was like, maybe I don't want to read this, but I kept getting pulled back into the premise, and finally I was like, okay, at one point I kind of fast forwarded ahead, and when I had about an hour left in the book, the way that the authors were describing how society changed and how they were like introducing banking, but that brought a whole other list of second and third order consequences with it. It's like, okay, this is a smart book as far as examining a theory of time travel. I don't think the characters are a strength really at all, but the concept of the story, other than that, was very well executed. So I do recommend, with a high 3 stars, we'll say 3.5 stars, An Angel Called Peterbilt by Gorg Huff and Paula Gadet and Eric Flint, the late Eric Flint. Content warning for language and some mentions of sensuality, but like the language, it's just, we'll say it's ex-military / trucker accurate, and the rest of it is it fits the setting. So check that one out, and I'll probably do a written review of this one up at Upstream when I get the chance. Till next time, drive safe. See you out there.